open and shut their eyes. I mean, all of that. It tells you a lot more about the person than you will get by listening to what's coming out of their mouth. And with Tupac Shakur, I mean, he was actually, when you look at his writing, his actual writing, he was actually texting. It's like he invented how to text, you know. And this was long before they had the preponderance of texting nowadays. But I find today you will find excellent poets, the young poets coming up, who are able to adapt the technological aspects of their lives to the literature that they produce. You know, and here you're going to have the good and the bad, because that's one thing about poetry. 10 people can read the same poem, and 10 of them will say, well, I don't understand this, or this means nothing to me. But that's what's so great about poetry. Poetry is a art form as such that each of these persons, it will affect them different, because poetry talks to the life experience that you've had. In a way, you're looking into a mirror, and people look into a mirror nowadays, and there are things in there that they don't like, and there are things that they like. Well, poetry is a mirror that people look into, and it will always give you the reflection that it wants to give you. In essence, it will give you the message that you need to see.
And before we continue on to a couple of poems out of Freedom Land, or maybe some spare work you have, to kind of wrap things up, talking with you about a variety of subjects, so we've kind of got an insight into your poetic method, your method of communication. But I wanted to ask, you mentioned at one point on the campuses and all over the major universities, they're teaching kind of manipulation, really, ways of, manipulating an audience, or, for the sake of journalism, and I wondered if there's a connection between this type of mentality as well as the emergence of a lot of the gory, violent literature that has no real literary purpose, and if that's a general sign of decline in our times. Maybe there was a period in American history, or where literature was elevated as a cultural exuberance instead of a forced to say fuck you to everything, and for no reason, a nihilistic, grandeur of some kind that's going around right about now. Maybe we're just feeling so nihilistic because we're in an age of, cultural manipulation. We can't trust your neighbors, you just want to isolate. Everything is going downhill really quick. And maybe you could give your thoughts on the future as well, and kind of talk about a little bit about why you think that we've emerged into this culture, where everything is every man for himself.
Well, I think the thing that's missing in our culture, and when I say our culture, I'm speaking of America, because although I have been to other countries, I haven't spent enough time in them to speak on their values, or what their future might look like, or whatever. But this idea that people first had when they first started coming to California, that they would build this city on the hill, something that other nations would emulate. I mean, today, other nations don't seek to emulate America. People that come here don't come here for freedom and justice and liberty and all that stuff, because a lot of those civil rights have been taken from Americans. People come here because those who are oppressed, whether it be by poverty, whether it be by the government, whether it be by the environment they live in, they're looking to find something, at least this is what I see, they're looking to find something that will put them in a place where they not only have to suffer those problems anymore, but they can get enough money to where they can alleviate their problems. I mean, they look at coming to America as a means to get money in their pockets so they could become one of the 1%. That's what the American dream has become. And our writing reflects it. I mean, the thing that young authors talk about in their writing today, they're basically doing the same thing my generation, which is the baby boomer generation, did, is they're rebelling against the establishment. And the reason that happens is, for generation after generation after generation, we continue to teach the same lessons to the students. And we put a little revision or a twist on it, you know, where, like I say, you can walk into university campuses now, and all of your arts program are diminishing. And I mean, your arts are the most important thing, I think, in a culture, because they actually are proof that you were here, that these people were here. They are a vital part of history in this country. They also are a vital means of inciting a person's imaginations, inciting their ability to reason, you know, and it's also a person's way to look into how other people, other cultures, other nations think. And without that, I mean, we will isolate ourselves in this bubble, and they're teaching people basically the unethical way to communicate with the rest of the world, to participate, you know, in the cultures of the rest of the world. They teach them business, you know, it's all about, you know, how to pad your resume so it would look good, you know, all the little points. And they're not teaching them to actually tell the truth about themselves, but how to put certain code words in or whatever that will make somebody think that they're getting something that they're not. And these are things that I see, because I walk into businesses and stores, and the people may have degrees, they may have these awesome resumes, but they don't actually know how to do the jobs that they've been hired to do. And those who know how to do the jobs don't get hired. For, like in my case, I applied for jobs down here, and the fact that I didn't have an ID, I mean, you know, it was like, hey, you don't have an ID, you can't get a job. So now I've gotten one, and it's still, you can't get one. You send out your resume, I mean, you send them out by I've sent out so many resumes, like, since I've been here. And the job industry growth that they're talking about here, it's just not happening. You have to know somebody in order to get a job here in Texas. And that's the same thing wherever I've been in this country. You know, it doesn't matter what skills you actually have. No, our society is set up to where nobody actually gets to see the skills that the person has. And too often they'll hire somebody that, well, I mean, just look around. Our infrastructure is falling apart. Our housing, you know, they build houses nowadays that fall apart in a couple of years. I mean, all that kind of stuff. I don't know, it's like, grab the money now and whatever happened later, that's tough. You know, just get the money. And that's what I see.
That's as well as me. I see a lot of that behavior. We're trading honesty for lies in the form of, you know, degrading the arts and excluding them from the curriculums and you know, speaking of which, you know, I think it's a good time in this interview for you to maybe read a couple of poems and maybe even give a couple of words of wisdom about the effect or the overall impression of the poem that it has on you, as well as what you expect from the reader.
Well, since that's one thing, since I've been down here, my writing has gotten really, really great lately. And I don't know, I think what it is When they talk about the suffering artists, they're not particularly pointing to the fact that you may go hungry, you may be homeless or whatever. I think what it does is all this frustration and struggle that you're going through actually turns on another motor inside of you, and it helps you to focus your creative third eye. And I mean, it just, since I've been here, I mean, I've written enough. I mean, for the next 2 years, I'll be tightening up what I've written to produce another book. Hopefully, I'm working on one of a book of short stories, and I've got in the process 3 other poetry manuscripts. But like I say, I figure in the next year, next 2 years, I'm gonna be tightening those up so that the finished product will be what I see as the perfect artistic creation. One of the poems I've written while I'm here is actually inspired by one of my favorite poets, Laura Kosiski. And I've gotten to the point now where, I mean, if she teaches a class in basket weaving, I'm taking it. She's an excellent poet. But this is called, and one thing I don't do is tell people what my poetry's about.
Right.
I think that's wrong. A person has to read it and come to their own understanding. I mean, if a person says, well, what did you mean by this word or that word? Fine, you know, that's okay. But as far as telling them this is what that poem is about, like I said, any poem written will affect every person that reads it in a different way. Hopefully, the best that I can hope for when I write a poem is that my poem will help them deal with something that has caused a hardship on their life, or my poem will help them see a new way to accomplish something that they couldn't have before, or it will aid them in giving them closure in something that has plagued them all their life, or it will turn their activist mode on, and they will actively rebel against something which they find in this poem and which they find out in the world, which they know to be wrong. So this is called Poem Beginning with a Line by Laura Kosiski. This is the glimpse of the God you were never supposed to get. As if a shimmer of madness suffused the geography and its people, conjuring a bestial will into existence, designing itself to garner survival. Others could see it, even the conveniently distracted, the truth that is always the velocity of money, the mean-spirited narratives and self-serving rhetoric, like perception that is relative to point of view, restraining as if everybody is nobody to everyone else. The defects in democracy, always a question of applied force. Buzzards spiraling down like stirred up flakes of ashes. An irony with a mean streak of optimism, circling, falling through the signature of oxygen. There in stark emerald relief, that snake of myth wrapped around the top strand of barbed wire is proof the world saves its best horrors for last. Something muscular, cloven, and drawn lunatic flesh of elastic evil. The ozone scent of blood, of vigorous rot, and lightning flashing amplitudes of electric fire that bullwhips shadow. The ominous movement into the crescendo of radiance. Eyes like glass shards of black obsidian, a wraith-like lament that incites the fires of the ancient ones. There was dust on the man in the long black coat.
Wonderful.
I'm going to read one more for you. The recent, I should say, troubles that we've had here in America concerning police brutality. I mean, I'm going to personally say straight up, I mean, not all policemen are bad. But growing up, I can honestly say I have never called a policeman for help, because what I have seen in my lifetime is that when a black person calls a policeman for help, whether you're a victim or the perpetrator, you're in trouble. I mean, I have learned, this is my experience. And like I said, they're not all bad, but it's a perpetuating thing in America. I mean, lynching still goes on. It's just done legally now. I mean, you know, a policeman goes out, murders somebody, the police in-house investigation says, oh no, he didn't do anything wrong, and he walks. And, you know, some of the black males, I will say this straight up, some of the black males that have been killed, they probably deserved it. I mean, really, because like I stated earlier, it doesn't matter what color you are, to whether you're going to be a bad person or a good person. That has nothing to do with it. You know, it's a lot other things in our society that will lead to something like that, like childhood abuse or poverty, or, you know, underrepresentation in the, you know, the society. You know, those things would have more effect on whether a person would be good or bad than their color or their faith or any of that. So, I mean, you know, those in power will point your eye to distract you and make you look at things that are meaningless when it comes to this. But what it amounts to is too many black men have been getting murdered, and too many police have been getting away with it. And this will go on. I mean, like I said, cowardice is an innate trait of Americans. I mean, they'll say, oh, that's bad, but they're not going to do nothing about it. You know, they still believe that nonviolent protest is going to change something, or voting, or signing a petition. Well, it has always been my experience that when people without guns meet people with guns, the ones with guns win. Basically that. This is called Fast Black in Ferguson, Missouri. Our anger crouches inside the clamorous beating of our hearts and the bloody taste of our spit, grown bitter as treads softly, evading the odds stacked against us. Too many multiple gunshots inflaming the U.S. of black resentment, loitering somewhere we can't belong, but as a metaphor of menace and mayhem. The gravity of Molotov riot and rampage, and clenched fists ratcheting and extruded machinery releasing a quiet, brooding plunder of shattered glass and bulleted bottles of frustration from dissent, so burdened, livid all the time. A murderous sheen of mercenary crow velocities, the same old mile in the same old broke-ass shoes, the stepped-on, scuffed-up shoes, the other shoe, the speed at which it travels, falling brick-like from the swollen history of bigotry, and most often blackness with congealed blood blooming from the side of our face. Could really care less about come to blue-eyed Jesus, like a long wait for a train don't come. Always the facade of guardian angel. Police emptied 7 vials of Murder Incorporated, deemed unindicted by law and order. Always racial profiling disproportionately into the panopticon of mandatory minimum mass incarcerate our ass, the ankle-monitored probation and injustice parole of blackness, branded criminal thud of thugs and unlawful malinger from law abiding become a confluence of disobedience in defiance of human bodies' statistical capacity